Hola, sean bienvenidos y bienvenidas a un nuevo Destino Nómada. El día de hoy vamos a tener un episodio un poco diferente. Este episodio va a ser completamente en inglés. Así es que para nuestra audiencia que no entiende inglés, les pedimos disculpas, pero va a estar un tema muy relevante. Es acerca de innovación en participación ciudadana. Este episodio va a estar disponible a partir del día viernes en Spotify y también en Facebook. Y para quienes nos vean en Facebook, si ustedes van a configuraciones, van a poder ver este episodio con subtítulos en inglés para quienes puedan leer mejor que lo que pueden escuchar. También eso los puede ayudar. Y sin nada más que decir, vamos a nuestra invitada de hoy. In today's episode, we have a very relevant topic concerning the challenges to democracy that we observe in different parts of the world. We are going to talk about the OECD report, innovative citizen participation, and new democratic institutions catching the deliberative wave. And we have invited Ieva Cesnulaityte. Ieva holds a degree in international relations at the University of Birmingham and a Master of Public Policy at the Sciences Po in France. Currently, she works for the Open Goverment Unit at the OECD in Paris and is one of the co-authors for this report. Welcome to Nómada, Ieva.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here.
And also, we have in this conversation to Mario Reyes and Ignacia Uribe. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo, Ieva, Ignacia. Nice to be here.
Thank you, Ieva, for your time also.
Yes, thank you very much, Ieva, for accepting our invitation to this conversation. It's going to be in English, so maybe it's going to be a little bit more challenging for our audience, but it's going to be certainly very interesting topic for them. Let's start the conversation. This is this report. What's the motivation for the OECD to launch this report, to have an open government unit? Why citizen participation is so important for the OECD?
So to begin with, maybe I'll just explain a little bit about the OECD. I'm not sure if everyone knows very well. So it's an organization of economic cooperation and development that has 37 members across the world, and Chile is also one of the members. And what we do is we help governments develop good policies in various areas of work. So we collect data and evidence, and we compare policies across different countries, member and non-member countries. We see what are the best practices, and based on that, we can advise and provide recommendations on policies for different areas. So in particular, I'm working at the Governance Directorate, an Open Government Unit. And our unit works on overall principles of open government, that is transparency, accountability, integrity, and stakeholder participation that are all very important for governments to uphold. And I am in particular, with my colleague Claudia Schwal, is working on innovative citizen participation, which both the OECD and our unit believes that it's at the core of open government, at the core of the good relationships between the government and the citizens. It helps build trust. It helps rebuild this relationship. It helps produce better policies that in turn better reflect citizens' needs. So this particular report looks at one of these more innovative forms of citizen participation, because there's a range of participation opportunities such as public consultations or participatory budgets or all different kinds of things that you can have. But we have noticed that recently governments have taken up to organize these very specific representative deliberative processes to be able to produce informed citizen recommendations for the government. These have been more and more used over the years. So we took it upon us to collect the data about all of these processes that happened to date and to see for what issues governments have been initiating these processes to address, and how, on what levels of government, how have they worked, what are the best practices. So this was our motivation. So what we did, we collected almost 300 examples of such citizens' juries or citizen assemblies that happen all over the world. And we looked at around 60 criteria concerning all of them. And this report that you've mentioned, Catching the Deliberative Wave, is the output of it. So
yeah, we are going into detail about the report. I had the chance to read it, most of it. Ignacia, would you like to start?
Yes, Ieva. Well, I'm not sure if you're aware, but today in Chile, we are less than 2 weeks away from knowing if we'll have a new constitution, and it will be the first one written in democracy. So in this context, there is a civil society campaign that aims to get animals recognized as sentient beings by the new constitution. And today it has more than 200,000 signatures. On the other hand, there are many countries where with that number, you can call, for example, for a referendum. How do you think we can move forward to a more participative democracy where the civil society is part of the decision making?
So I think there's many different ways that you can do participation. So what you're mentioning is more organized civil societies proposing these ideas. So this is actually also one of the areas of work of our team. I don't work on it, but it's also linked to what we do. So of course, it's important that the government has a relationship with the civil society, and there are the ways that they can interact through also different stakeholder engagement. But in particular, what you're talking about, I mean, I don't have enough context to be able to comment exactly what's the best way forward. If you have citizen support for these ideas, there could also be processes organized, such as deliberative processes, to maybe discuss this idea that the civil society is bringing forward. So the way that, let's say, these deliberative processes work that we've analyzed, it is that government decides what is the issue that they would like citizens' opinions on. So let's say in your situation could be the animal rights issue. And then they randomly select a sample of a population. It could be of a various size, varying from, let's say, 30 people to sometimes it's over 200 if the issue is very, very broad and very important. And then these citizens are randomly selected, but also in a way stratified, so they represent the population the way it is, so depending on the issue that it concerns. So let's say either a country or a city, depending on the demographic composition of this community. So you'll have a certain percentage of men, women, different levels of education, different locations these people live. So you gather this microcosm of a community of citizens that represent the society as a whole, and then you provide them with various information from all sides of the argument. So let's say the argument that the issue that you are concerned with. So citizens are able to hear from different stakeholders, such as NGOs, civil society, but also other groups such as government officials or any other stakeholders that are relevant. They're able to learn about the issue, and they have sufficient time, at least 2-3 days, to learn and discuss this topic. And then in the end, they're able to produce their own informed opinions around the topic that you're asking them to provide informed citizen recommendations and a position of the society on this particular issue. So I don't know enough about your context. However, this could be also a possibility that you could consider.
Mm-hmm. And well, in Europe, you have something called European Citizen Initiative. I don't know if, what has been your personal experience with that, and does the OECD have maybe a recommendation or something that the rest of the countries should replicate, something like that?
So the OECD recommendation on open government highlights that the policies should be informed by stakeholders and citizens' opinions in an innovative way. So in a way, we do have this recommendation. However, it does not specify exactly the way that it should be done. So one of the ways that we address this is we produce such reports like the one that I'm mentioning to give some guidelines on the ways that the citizens and civil society could be involved in the process of decision making.
Thank you.
Well, Ieva, I really enjoyed the report, so I would like to thank you for it because it's quite informative, and I think it does provide many interesting tools for governments to pursue more participation. I do have a few comments regarding the criteria of inclusiveness and representativeness, because well, we live in increasingly complex, diverse societies. For instance, due to immigration, as you may probably know, in most European countries, but also in Latin America, for example, in Chile, we also have an increasing immigrant community, and I think the issues of inclusiveness, representation, are growing in importance. And my question is on how participatory methods and participatory processes could ensure that everyone has a voice, considering that many people who might be invited to participate might not necessarily have the time, the resources to engage in these processes. So what would you recommend, or what practices can we consider in order to allow this process to actually be fully representative of society and include those groups in society that have been historically been marginalized from decision making?
Thank you for the very good question. So this is precisely why we are recommending random selection of participants, because this way you don't only publish a call, let's say on a website or somewhere where you ask people to sign up, and the usual people who always participate, they are the ones who sign up for the citizen participation practices. But when you do random selection, it means that you send out either phone or post invitations to 10 to 20,000 citizens randomly located all across either a city or a country. So everyone has more or less equal chance of getting such an invitation. And then this way, you reach those people who normally wouldn't even, check those channels where they would be able to sign up for participation. And then in stratifying it to represent all different groups, you make sure that it's a community that it's a group of people that represents the community as a whole. So including any minorities, including genders, including different levels of education, etc. Also, what we recommend is to remunerate participants for taking part in such engagement processes, because they usually require quite some time, a weekend or two, and could be even more. So such as, let's say, in legislative juries, people are remunerated. So we recommend the same, so that everyone has the same capacity to participate. Also, we recommend providing, let's say, childcare or elderly care or any other arrangements that are necessary to enable everyone to have equal chance of participating, so that people who wouldn't be able to take a day out of work, they are compensated, so they are able to do so.
I think it seems to be that these processes need really to be institutionalized and be part of a country's culture, and the way people actually expect, for example, that engaging in these processes is part of your duties. Because it seems to be, for example, that I'm talking about my own personal experience and the perception I have about these issues in my own country. And it seems to be that if someone, for example, tells his or her employer, I'm not going to be able to work tomorrow because I have to participate in the local government's assembly. That doesn't happen here in this country, and it seems to be that we don't have a culture of civic engagement in such a way that people feel and understand that it's a duty, and employers are not only mandated to do so, but also accept the fact that people will engage in these processes eventually. So it seems to be, my impression is that it might take time in order for this culture to be part of everyday life, and in order for people to understand that if they are called for engaging in these processes, they will have to take some time. It's a duty, because you have rights, but you also have some duties and some responsibilities with your own community, and so employers as well will accept this as a fact, and not probably make any problem because of this. I don't know if you have any if you know of any experience of countries that have actually had to build a culture of participation, because I'm not an expert in the field, but I understand that some countries like Switzerland, you might say, for example, or many other countries in Northern Europe, have a tradition of civic engagement. But many other countries, and I guess this is the fact in Latin America, or it might be the fact in some countries in South or Eastern Europe, they don't have that culture. And so people don't expect to engage in the decision making and participating in policy making at the local or national level. So what can you do in order to promote this or institutionalize these practices?
So first to say that I absolutely agree with you that it does require a culture of participation, but it's not something that you can achieve over a day. And as long as citizens sort of demand this opportunity to participate, then the government is also the one to respond to it. And at the moment, I think your idea that the employer should be okay with giving this time off to take part in such deliberative processes or other participatory opportunities is a great one, because normally now these processes are organized on the weekends so that people wouldn't necessarily have to take some time off. However, it would enable much more people to say yes to participating in such processes if they were given a day off by their employer. And it's one of the policies that would be actually very helpful to bring forward this culture of participation. However, so far it's not been implemented that much, but I think it's a very good idea. If that responds to your question.
Yeah, and maybe I'm thinking about how technology might also enable people who might have different life circumstances to participate, because you mentioned, for example, these processes usually take place, and I was reading about the different participatory processes, and it seems that some of them actually take a lot of time, and some of them might require people to be somewhere, for example, and bring people to certain places and spend the whole day there. And obviously, that might be a little bit more complicated if people have different work arrangements. So, for example, if you think about someone who is working at night, for example, or someone who has family responsibilities, and that might be quite common. And if we don't, I think obviously this has been widely discussed, and there probably are many ways to deal with this. But probably if these designs might be taken into consideration the fact that people have many diverse life circumstances and duties and personal responsibilities. And so if we want to achieve full representativeness and inclusiveness, we should design this in such a way that people who might not be capable of moving during the weekend to a certain place, or people who might, for example, and because so, maybe technology could be an enabler of this wider, broad range of participation. What do you think in terms of technology? Do you think technology might offer a solution on how we can be achieve higher inclusiveness and representativeness in participatory processes?
I think this, in a way, you're completely right. And during the COVID, the whole COVID situation and the pandemic, because these deliberative processes are more of a face-to-face nature, all of the practitioners who are carrying out such processes, and also academics linked to this area of work, have been looking into the ways that they can continue deliberative processes and participation throughout this time. So then digital tools and virtual meetings and all these kinds of things become indispensable. So it is a discussion that we're having at the moment. And of course, digital tools can offer a lot of positive opportunities to enhance these processes or to make them more flexible in a way that you could, for example, have people not to meet just a full weekend or 2 full weekends, but break down the meeting in, let's say, 2 hours every day in the evening, which is also gives more flexibility for people. And for people don't have to travel long journeys to meet face-to-face. And you could make the learning phase of citizens also much more flexible, where you can pre-record presentations and all other reading materials where people can watch it or read it on their free time. So it does allow for much more flexibility. However, there's still questions whether it's exactly, the same, because it's not necessarily the same meeting in person. Because when you meet with this group of people, you learn together, you deliberate, you develop a sort of feeling of mutual trust and understanding in the group. You develop these sort of like understanding of the life stories of everyone in the room. You have these personal moments during the break where you connect to these other citizens. So you develop this really like a magic moment where, you connect with them. And it's very hard to replicate that online in a way. However, given the situation, of course, we have to adapt and look for ways for digital tools to replace some of these things. On the other hand, in terms of inclusiveness, of course, it can reduce it in a way that there's digital inequality and not everyone has access to these technologies. So you have to then make sure that everyone has some access to digital tools to be able to use the online technology for participation.
I fully agree with what you say. I think personal bonding is important, and obviously also engaging with people who come from different social backgrounds, which is something that mostly doesn't happen very often in my own country, where I think civic participation has been diminished for many decades. And what I've seen now is that people are claiming a little bit more of what they have lost, because what we have seen, and I'm talking a lot of my own personal interpretation of the evolution of my country and other Latin American countries, is that at a certain point, policy-making issues became a subject for experts, for the technocracy. So those who were in charge of deciding and deliberating about important policy issues were those who were expert in the economics or in the whatever the field was, with a technical, specialized technical expertise. And people were left behind from the decision-making and participation. And many people feel nowadays, and I think one of the reasons that people distrust government and distrust politicians in general, and you can see a low level of trust in institutions in Chile and in Latin America, but you can also see that trend in many other countries in the world, as you mentioned in the report. Like, it's a general broad trend that people tend to trust less of governments, of the Congress, of most of the traditional institutions of political parties. And I tend to feel that one of the reasons for that is that policymaking process have become detached of people, and people have less and less ways to deal with decision making. And so I think that what you are offering in this report is quite important, because it allows people to reclaim the opportunity to engage in public decision making. But on the other hand, I feel like many people are still, or may still be, skeptical, and I'm talking about the experience of my countries and of similar countries, because they believe that some subjects should be the domain of the experts. And so my question is, how do we decide how people, and what type of issues should people participate? And I mentioned this because someone might say, for example, monetary policy or any other subject is something that can only be discussed by those who have a degree on whatever the specific subject is. But how do we decide? But it's going to have an impact on people anyhow. So how do we decide where do people in general, a random collection of people, should participate, and what subjects should be the field of the experts?
Mm-hmm. So overall, I think that if you think about participation, we're not saying that a deliberative process is the only way to participate and like the best way to participate, because these processes take quite a bit of time, and there are specific issues that they're good to address. So let's say some issue that is quite debated in the society and needs some sort of more of a consensus or a discussion. So firstly, I just like to make a point that other participatory tools are also perfectly fine, not necessarily, we always have to go for a deliberation. So in the report, we suggest like what are the best issues addressed by deliberative processes. So for example, when there's like a political deadlock, when it's hard to move to one way or another, or when there's like low levels of trust, things like that. But overall, in terms of the place of citizens and experts and, the elected representatives in the society, I feel like there's space for everyone, because we're not saying that, citizens should replace the represented electeds or the experts, but citizens have their life experiences in their variety. That is a perspective that no expert actually had. So we're saying that experts have a role of providing the expert knowledge on the issue, and both citizens and elected representatives, they consider this information, but the citizens have to also contribute what they have lived through and how this particular idea or policy will affect their personal life, which is a really enriching policy-making process, because then you are leaving no one behind. And let's say when a law is being made or a policy is being produced, you don't maybe pay that much time to analyze every aspect and how every person's life might be affected to it, because it's not entirely possible. So citizens can be very helpful for policymakers to provide these perspectives. So I'm saying that there is a space for everybody's voice, and there doesn't have to be any sort of competition. And citizens, when they're given time and resources to learn about the issue, the information which is prepared by researchers or experts, they can come up with very brilliant ideas and solutions through their collective intelligence and through the fact that through their diversity. In terms of also, you are asking a more concretely what topics should be addressed. So this is also up to the government to identify how much time they have for a certain policy to be developed, because when you are engaging someone in a decision making, such as citizens, you need to do it adequately in advance. So then the persons participating in the process have actual opportunity to shape the policy. And then once they produce some sort of recommendations and suggestions, government can still make some changes to the policy idea that they had in the beginning, so that the time that participants spent on developing these recommendations are not wasted, and the relationship of trust can be developed. So it also, depends on many different factors.
Of course. I want Rodrigo or Ignacia to add something, because I've been talking too much.
No problem, Mario. No
but
problem.
I
We
really
have
agree.
enough time.
I just have one more question. How you consider like the budget for this process? Like, can every government apply this, or it's up to the reality of every country? Because if you were talking about like paying everyone that is going to engage in this process, I guess it's not that cheap to implement.
Sorry, my headphones went down. So your question was whether every government is able to apply such deliberative processes?
Yes, I mean, because of the budget, like maybe not every country has the budget to invest in this.
Yeah, that's actually what we see in terms of the countries who have so far have done such deliberative processes. It's mostly high-income countries because they do require quite some investment. So that is in fact true. But the thing is that these deliberative processes, they come in many different shapes and forms. So we have identified 12 different models, ranging from, let's say, a planning cell to worldwide views to citizens jury and citizens assembly. And you can see all of these models in the report. So some of them are of a smaller scale and shorter, so they require less resources. So it's not something that is exclusively for countries that have more economic capacity, but so far it has been more applied by these countries.
Rodrigo?
Okay, yes, thank you. I would like to talk about the institutionalization, a terrifying word, because in the report, it's actually one of the challenges probably for the deliberative processes are actually that they became part of the institution. It's mentioned in the report that most of the cases analyzed are basically depend a little bit on the willing of the current authorities. Can you explain a little bit more into this institutionalization challenge for deliberative processes?
Yes, so we've seen that lately there have been governments, mostly on regional level, which have decided to institutionalize these deliberative processes, to embed them in their policy-making process, to make them in a permanent way. So one of the most well-known examples is the Ost-Belgian German-speaking community of Belgium, which in 2019, they have set up this permanent citizens' council, where they first select, I think, 24 randomly selected citizens, and they have the agenda-setting role where they're able to choose what topics then randomly selected citizens analyze over the year. So, and then they initiate up to 3 citizens juries per year with another set of randomly selected citizens who then analyze and produce recommendations on the topics that citizens themselves have actually suggested. So in this way, by giving citizens an agenda-setting role and giving them the opportunity to discuss any topic that they are interested in, you sort of also enable them in much more than in a situation where a government is the one dictating or suggesting the topic for a deliberative process.
Sorry, yeah, I understand that the specific case, the Ost-Belgium model, I understand that the parliament is not forced or it's not mandatory that they take up the citizens' recommendations. What's the challenge here? Is it difficult for governments to be forced to feel themselves limited by this citizen action, or do you see that we'll see progress in this field in the short term?
Well, then yes, the parliament is obliged to discuss the citizen recommendations produced. They're not obliged to implement them, but they have to get back to the citizens explaining and giving reasons and arguments if they're not implementing Why and how? Because at the end of the day, they are also, it's their job, they're elected representatives, to also make policy decisions. So the idea is that these processes are helpful for them. However, they're still in the ones that are making the final decision, unless they choose not to do, not to do so. But you were asking a little bit more before about these why institutionalize. So besides giving them a permanent role in decision making, the citizens, institutionalization also helps to reduce, let's say, the cost of participation, because if you already have people who know how to organize these citizen juries and assemblies, how to randomly select, are trained to help with deliberations, so you have all of this capacity in-house already, which then lets governments, easier organize deliberative processes when needed, with much less resources and much more agility. So then governments in this way are able to tackle much more of these complicated issues with citizens' help. So there are many different reasons for this. Also to show. Sorry.
Please,
yes.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
It's also, a sign of civic respect and trust from the government to the citizen, that citizens are capable of contributing to the public life, and they're important.
It seems to be very important, this idea of the random selection of the citizens. I've heard some people criticizing this method because of the legitimacy that they hold, that basically people randomly selected, they don't have the same legitimacy as someone that had been elected by a normal or traditional election. What's your thought about that?
Well, both of them, I feel, have legitimacy in a way, because if you think about it, when you select a random sample of a population that represents very well the microcosm of the community, then you have much more diversity in the group than, let's say, in the members of the parliament, which are usually tend to be maybe male, over 50, etc. So in a way, this also, it is a very legitimate method of selection, because it creates this diversity and representativeness that is not necessarily achieved through elections. And also, since you give an opportunity for anyone statistically to be selected randomly in the sample, it also provides legitimacy in a way.
In the report, there are mentioned some good practices for deliberative processes. I do not pretend to go through all of them, because there are actually 11. But some of them are, for example, purpose, accountability, transparency, representativeness, inclusiveness. I think something that discussed with Mario. I would like to your thoughts, or if you can explain a little bit more in detail, this accountability thing, this the real possibility to influence on public decisions. Can you explain a little bit more about the accountability best practice?
Yes. So just overall, in part of the report, we have produced this good practice principles for the use of deliberative processes in the public decision making that you mentioned, that are 11. So far, we've actually seen quite a few governments taking these on board for their deliberative processes. And in particular, accountability is a principle that refers to the fact that, if you organize a deliberative process or any participatory process, and you invest your time and energy, and you ask from citizens that they invest quite a bit of their own time and energy and trust and participate in this whole process, that their voice will be heard. So in a way that the government will consider the recommendations provided by the citizens, and that they will close the feedback loop by getting back to the citizens and giving them feedback and showing them that their recommendations were considered and taken seriously, and let them know which ones would be implemented, which ones maybe not, and giving rationale for all of it. So this principle is all about meaningful participatory processes, because just through meaningful participation, you can rebuild this relationship of trust between the government and the people, when people see that their mental and their time investment pays off. So when a deliberative or any participatory process is organized, is very key to understand and communicate what is the mandate that the citizens have, towards what the recommendations are going and what impact will they actually have. So this should be the very first question that you ask yourself before you organize a participatory process.
And what about the transparency thing? Because that's a very important concept in the current times. There are many democratic systems under certain skepticism by citizens. What is this about transparency recommendation?
So transparency principle is all about ensuring that the whole process is public in a way that it's clear the way it's going to be structured. It's clear how it's going to impact the policy making. It's clear who is taking part of it, how participants are selected, how the information that will be provided for citizens to consider, to inform their deliberation, how it's formed and who will provide any testimony, what will be the stakeholders that will participate. Also, in many cases, you see that the sessions are also online streamed, so the broader public can also see, and that can inspire a broader debate. So it's all about ensuring that the process is transparent as possible. So in a way, sometimes people can feel like the policy making is a black box when you really don't know like how it's happening, based on what. And transparency is just to ensure that every step of the way it's clear, it's trustworthy, and it's building a new way of making public decisions.
You mentioned something before. I would like now your opinion more about this question. Is about this random selection method and versus the traditional election, the representative election. Do you think that the random system is meant to replace traditional elections, or you see them as more complementary in the future?
Well, at the moment, I see them as more complementary. However, you never know because there's different positions and different opportunities about this. But in a way, you need in a way this representative way of selecting representatives as well through elections, because these are the people who are invested into, let's say, public decision making, who would like to give up their time for it. And then if you do a random selection, let's say to form a parliament or something, it's not impossible, but then you are not sure if the person is actually going to be willing to do it and give up a big chunk of their time for it. You're not sure. There still has to be some sort of voluntarity in that. So I think it's a very interesting proposition, and also the one to explore in the future.
And from your experience, you have way more information than us in the OECD. What's the main challenges for these deliberative processes to be implemented worldwide, more broadly? More countries can adopt this kind of systems. What's the main challenge here?
Firstly, I think it's not, even though they've been used more and more, they're not, that well known, and this is what we're hoping to change. So there should be a spread of knowledge about how they work, what are their benefits, how to organize one, and also you need the practitioners who are experienced with actually organizing those. And like you mentioned before, one of the core things to work on is this whole culture of participation, when governments see citizens as potential partners to solve public problems, and not someone who has to be feared or addressed in a way that when they start protesting, or who are partners from the very beginning and for whom the government is actually working to produce these policies. Yeah.
Ignacia, Mario, would you like to do some last question? We are approaching time now.
Well, I have one question, maybe one question. I don't know if you probably know this specific subject, Ieva, because I think it's more about the design of the specific deliberative processes. So, in terms of, for instance, how to ensure that you, for example, deal with power dynamics that might take place within the context of a deliberative process. So, for instance, if you're going to be bringing people who might have different social backgrounds, particularly in a society where you have a lot of inequality, how do you manage that everyone has actually a voice, and how do you ensure that everyone is allowed to voice their opinions, and how do you avoid, for example, the maybe the risk of reaching a false consensus? Because I tend to think that one problem in group dynamics is that the need to reach a consensus that might censor certain voices and opinions that might not be aligned with this majority opinion. So, which is the problem of groupthink. So, how do you avoid that risk? How do you mitigate that risk, and how do you manage power dynamics within a group, ensuring that everyone, including people who might belong to marginalized groups, can participate in equal conditions in these processes? Because you might invite them, but that doesn't ensure that they will express their opinions freely.
Mm-hmm. So yes, it's an important question. So in a way, it is a role of a moderator and facilitator, because you would, in a deliberative process, normally have discussions first in smaller groups and only then in a bigger group. So the role of the facilitator in a smaller group is to create an environment where, you know, everyone gets comfortable to expressing their views within the group. And if they see that, you know, someone is not really comfortable, or they can talk to them, or they can ask for someone who's actually not participating that actively what is their personal opinion. So the role of the moderator is to make sure that those who are, you know, more extroverted and prone to speaking more, they're not dominating the discussion, and that everyone's voice is heard. So there's like facilitation techniques that are geared towards that. And you've also mentioned that in terms of consensus, well, there doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, a search for consensus that is unanimous. And in many of these reports of deliberative processes, you have recommendations, but then you also have a minority report where you can include if someone, you know, is really against one or other recommendation or measure, and you can explain their point of view as well. So the whole diversity of views is included in the final result. And in the search of unanimous consensus, these various points are not lost and still taken into account.
Okay, let's go through the last section of this episode, some recommendations for the audience. We have 5 minutes, so Ignacia, would you like to be the first one? Your sound. You're muted, yeah.
Sorry. Yes, I would like to recommend the campaign. I was talking in the first question that it aims to get animals recognized as sentient beings. People still can sign up. And I think it's very interesting because it's something that it already happened in so many countries. It happened already in Europe and some states of the United States. So I think it would be great to have something like that here. So the campaign is called No Son Muebles, and people can sign up and to get to know more about the campaign in nosonmuebles.cl, nosonmuebles.cl.
Nosonmuebles.cl. Buenísimo. Thank you, Ignacia. Ieva, would you like to continue?
Yeah, so I have some recommendations, but they're more personal, not necessarily linked to the topic. Because if you're interested to the topic, please read the report, and there's a lot of resources there as well, and follow-up readings on deliberative democracy if you're interested. So I will not mention all of them at the moment, but there are a couple of podcasts that I like and just listen in general, which is one of them is Hidden Brain from NPR, which is
Hidden Brain.
Hidden Brain, which is all about different societal, psychological explorations about different topics that I find interesting, including psychology, behavioral economics, sociology, and things like that.
Oh, great. It's available on Spotify, iTunes?
Yes, it's available, I think, on Spotify and on any podcast platform that you can find. And also the one I like is a Radical Exchange, which are different conversations also around topics about the future of our societies. And
Radical Change. Radical Exchange.
Exchange, yes.
Great.
Yes. I'd like to also, the book that I read recently and I really liked and like to recommend is Walk Through Walls by Marina Abramovic. And it's about the life of Marina Abramovic, who was a very inspiring artist and performance artist. And it really gives you her point of view of life, which is very empowering and encourages you to go and live your life fully.
Great. 2 podcasts and a book. Okay, Mario, your turn.
Well, I have a couple of recommendations. And there's one book that I've just read, which is The Ages of Globalization by Jeffrey Sachs. And it basically describes the evolution of globalization through the history of humanity. And it explains the impact of this new era of globalization we are entering, the digital era, and the biggest challenges. It's an interesting and quite an easy read for those who are interested in the issue of globalization. And the other one is also a fiction book. It's White Teeth by Zadie Smith. And Zadie Smith is one of the best recent English authors, and she writes about her own experience living and growing up in a multi-ethnic society in London in the 1970s, 1980s, and basically most of this is related to her own upbringing. So it's quite an interesting book and a really good read. So those are my 2 recommendations.
Nice. I also have just one recommendation. I saw a very good documentary. It's called Brain Factory. It's in the platform Curiosity Stream. So it was for all of the people that is interested in the future and the new technologies related to the brain is very interested. Okay, and with that, we are ready for today. Thank you very much, Ieva. It has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting to talk to you.
Thank
Agradecemos
you,
también a Mario y a Ignacia.
Thank you.
Y también vamos a mencionar a quienes ayudan a Nómada, Academia de Líderes, Academia Online, con cursos gratuitos para jóvenes de educación básica y media en temas de liderazgo. Pueden revisar más información en academialideres.org y también saludar a somosempleos.cl, la plataforma laboral inclusiva de Chile que también nos acompaña. Dicho eso, vamos a buscar el correcto fin de este episodio. Muchísimas gracias. Nos vemos en un próximo Destino Nómada.